Find other great podcasts like this one at podmoth.network.
Memento mori, an object serving as a warning or reminder of death. Death is inevitable, but how it happens can be tragically unfair. It can be dark, cruel, hateful, or just plain bizarre. I'm Megan, and I'll be your guide through these stories of chaos and devastation. Come listen as we dive into all types of true crime cases and learn about the evil that lurks among us, as well as the victims that deserved none of it. Join me every Monday for a missing person minisode, and every Thursday for a regular episode. You can go to mementomoripod.com for more information. Monsters are real, and they look like people.
Hey, Twisted listeners, I'm Cindy.
And I'm Diva.
This is Twisted Listeners, a podcast about murder
and lists.
We're brought to you by the Podmoth Podcasting Network. Check out their other podcasts. They're all great. And what else? I'm really sick, so my brain isn't working and my voice sounds weird, and I'll probably have some coughing fits, so I apologize, you guys. That's also a big part of why we're late. I had actually lost my voice and just couldn't record before, so apologies for being a little late this week. Hopefully it doesn't translate too much in the recording, but if it does, feel bad for me because I'm sick.
And she's sick and she's still coming up with content. She's still doing it. Still researching.
Doing what we can. This week I chose missing and murdered Indigenous women. So we're doing stories of that, of missing and murdered
Indigenous Native Heritage Month.
It's also Thanksgiving's coming up, so gotta shout that out.
Yep. And it's a super fucked up topic, and I tried to do cases of Indigenous people throughout, other topics as well, of course, but so it's not limited to just today,
Yeah.
But yeah, it's insanely fucked up and important to talk about over and over and over again how this is Native women have. I should have found the exact percentage, but a ridiculously high likelihood of being murdered.
Oh, it's crazy. It's 10 times as high as white women.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Some of the statistics that I read, and I'm not going to share a lot of them. Actually, on this episode, I don't think I'm going to share any of them because my story is super long. But it's really quite crazy.
It's dismal. Yeah.
It's fucked up. So real quick before we get into it, if you'd like to join us on Patreon, it's patreon.com/twistedlisters. If you'd like to join us on TikTok, which I basically just go on there and like other videos, but you can join us there. It's just at Twisted Listeners. If you'd like to join us on Instagram, you can do that at
Twisted Listeners PCast.
If you would like to send us an email with case suggestions, you can do that at
twistedlisterspod@gmail.com.
And if you'd like to check out our website, you can do that at
twistedlisterspod.com.
And we got an email thanking us for covering the murders that inspired horror movies. So I thought somebody was requesting it, and I was like, didn't we do that? And I had this big confusing talk. We did, you and I. No, we just did that. And I was like, are you sure? But then I read the email and I was like, oh, they're saying thank you because they requested it. So.
But we haven't done the reverse of horror movies that inspired murders. So we still could do that.
I swear.
Although you did do the Scream Killers.
I did. Well, okay, I did the Scream Killers. And I'm like, I swear to God, I just did that. But
no. Yeah, just the one. Yeah.
This is why I get confused. There's too many lists and there's too much overlap. So anyway, okay. Missing and murdered Indigenous women. I chose, so you go first.
Yes. This happened in 2020, right on the outbreak of COVID times, in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Pepita was 27. She also went by Pita. She was a member of the Navajo Nation, and totally by chance, my other case is also Navajo. So I'm just sticking here in New Mexico. Right. But they're both so important that I'm just going to do it.
Yeah.
She was from Crown Point, which is a little small town on the reservation. where her mom still lived. Pepita was super friendly, loved by everyone. She works as a cashier at a Hot Topic locally, which I love.
Yep.
They're still going strong.
Yes, they are.
But she also had bigger dreams of going back to school, kind of, and being an engineer or being a teacher. So she wasn't like, forever at Hot Topic.
Right.
But just doing it for now. She had met her boyfriend about named, his name was Nicholas K, or Nick K.
I thought for sure you were going to say Nicolas Cage. I was like, excuse me.
No, K.
What a name. Okay.
So she had moved into Nick's house about 6 months after they started dating. And by this point in 2020, they had lived together for about 3 years. She also goes back and forth to her mom's house in Crown Point as well.
And how old is she at this point?
27.
Oh, okay. All right. So she's not like, I mean, she's young, but she's not like super young.
No, she has her own life.
Right.
And not long, but she is super close with her mom.
Mm-hmm.
And not long before this, she had told her mom that her relationship with Nick had become abusive. Ooh. And that Nick's drinking had really gotten out of control and he had begun to hit her.
Oh, that's not good.
Her mom is like, get the fuck out. But of course, as so often happens, Pepita explained that she wanted to stay with him and like work things out and she loves him, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, it sucks because if you're together for that long, then the abuse slowly builds, so you just kind of get used to it. And then just it's incredible what people will end up dealing with because they're just like eased into it through like
and these people are manipulative. They're love bombing when they're not, being abusive. And all this shit. So
Ugh.
Yeah. So later on, investigators will find hospital records for Pepita and domestic violence charges that were filed against Nick. So there's like an active thing
there's
happening.
A trail of
an actual paper trail.
Yeah, actual paper trail. Mm-hmm.
I mean, which is, again, if there's not, that doesn't mean anything either. She could still be being abused, but just saying there also is evidence.
There is also, evidence of it. Right.
So March 24th, 2020, which, what a time that was.
God, that was, 10 days after California lockdown? It was the 14th, I think. Yeah, fuck, dude.
What a time.
Yeah.
So Pepita is last seen when her mom drops her off at her boyfriend Nick's house. And as she's leaving, she says, "Mom, I love you. Take care of yourself. Drive home safe." And that's the last time she sees her.
Is it her house with her boyfriend or is she living with her mom at that time?
It's her boyfriend's house. I guess I think it's with his family. Maybe that's why it's phrased that way.
Okay, got it. Okay.
Yeah, but it's phrased as the boyfriend's house and the mom is dropping her off.
Okay.
So yeah, she says, "I love you, Mom," et cetera, et cetera. And that's the last time she sees Pepita.
Ugh, that's fucked up.
So Pepita's mom, whose name by the way is Anita King, tries to get a hold of her over the next few days and can't, which is super unusual. Like I said, because they talk all the time.
Right.
And 3 days after she disappears, someone texts back to Anita, the mom, saying that he was sold her phone.
Whoa.
"Hi, I'm a random guy. I was sold your daughter's phone." Yes.
Uh-oh.
So she immediately raises alarms, goes to the police. She freaks out. And when she asks Nick what the fuck is up, he just vaguely says, "I don't know. We went out for a drink that night. We got in an argument and she left."
Uh-huh. That's convenient.
Which, classic guilty boyfriend fucking shit, right?
Right.
So, of course, Anita, her mom, calls the police. They dismiss her completely. And this is like, you could copy and paste this across many stories of Indigenous missing women as well.
Yep.
And girls. They just say like, "Oh, no, just give her a week or two. She's run off. She'll appear. Who cares?" Basically, who cares?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the family's like, "No, obviously we know her. She wouldn't do that." They unfortunately
also being sold. Like, that's not part of just running off. Like, come on.
Yeah. No. She just casually sold her phone. Yeah. So Anita can't use the reservation police with which she might have more luck because Pepita went missing in Albuquerque.
Oh, okay. So there's just nothing. Okay. It's out of their jurisdiction.
Yeah. So the family starts basically their own investigation. And what's really wild about this case is I'm going to talk about an investigation as if it was police, but just keep in mind that they don't do anything. Spoiler alert. They have done nothing.
They are totally not helpful. That's shocking.
They have done the amount of things they've done is 0 things.
0.
So Pepita's family literally just becomes cops, or what cops should be.
Investigators.
Investigators. And they go cover the area in flyers. They hand them out. They ask people if they've seen Pepita. They start organizing searches of the area, walking through like, what's it called? I don't know, in the desert, not forest, like the brush, I guess.
Yeah, okay.
You know, walking the area. And the investigation is somewhat hindered by the fact of what fucking time it is in the world, right? By COVID. The investigators also use that as an excuse, saying, oh, we can't meet with you because we're in lockdown.
Oh, God.
Which is kind of bullshit, because I'm pretty sure cops never stopped copping.
No, they
even
didn't.
In lockdown.
But this is part of them copping, is like finding ways
yeah.
to not be helpful or do what they need to do. So
exactly. So they
not
use
exactly
that,
shocking.
It's not legitimate. Yeah.
Right.
But her mom, Anita, does not fucking quit. And also I think there's a theme in a lot of, at least both of my stories so far too, where like, yeah, we're talking about this horrific crisis of murdered Indigenous women, but like also Indigenous women, especially the moms in these stories, are so fucking strong and resilient and tough and like badasses. Yeah, they don't fuck around. And like, it's the women and like trans and two-spirit, like Native people who have been never shutting the fuck up about MMIW, and they have never ever stopped like rallying the cry around this issue, and they have been like fighting
absolutely
since like forever. So yeah, I just want to highlight that too, because like, not to make them sound so passive, like they're just like taking this violence. Like, no, they're fighting back all the time.
Right. And
Anita is like one of these moms who like does not fucking quit.
Good.
Even in the face of, like I said, literally zero help.
Yeah, them just being like, we could not care less about your daughter. Yeah.
Police vaguely claim that they've interviewed Nick here, the boyfriend, and then he's not a suspect. This is what they tell her.
Seems like a nice guy. He had an alibi.
He's like a good guy. Nick is Native as well, by the way. He's Navajo. But that they still don't want to investigate. That doesn't matter.
Right.
So they give no clear reasons for why he's not a suspect. They don't even know. We don't even know that they did interview Nick, honestly.
Right. They could have just been lying and being like,
yeah. So April 19th, so about 3 weeks later after she goes missing for real, Nick files his own missing persons report. And in it, he claims that after she, so basically they went out drinking and she spoke with another guy, and that created some kind of conflict.
Okay.
So basically he's being jealous, which again, we don't know that happened at all.
Yeah.
But they had an argument according to him, and she quote unquote left on foot, which so many fucking husbands and boyfriends say this. And I'm sorry, girls do not flee on foot in the dark.
Yeah. No.
Like,
don't.
really?
That's not a thing.
No.
It's not a fucking thing.
Right? It really isn't. So he says he got a text from her later on, I think like a few days later, saying that she was with a guy who was possibly named Laramie. So but according to him, the text was just like, I'm with a guy.
Okay.
But he's saying in the his statement that he thought possibly it was Laramie. So according to him, she does not identify Laramie. This is his idea.
Oh, he's just like pulling names.
Yes.
Just like,
so she was with another guy. I thought possibly it was Laramie. Yeah.
Okay.
So at first, no one knows who this is. And he says, okay. So the family, again, no cops. The family puts out a notice on Facebook asking for information about a potential Laramie. Once they are able to see this statement of Nick's, they're like, okay, well, if the Laramie's real, who the fuck is it, right?
Right.
So eventually, Laramie, who does exist, gets in touch with the family and says, hi, yes, I knew Pepita. And I last saw her about 2 weeks before her disappearance. We were friends, and Pepita bought him a cupcake for his birthday and sang him happy birthday. It's like a cute friend thing. And this enraged Nick, and he actually hit her in front of Laramie.
Oh, wow. Now he's trying to like fuck with Laramie because he has some weird jealous obsession with Laramie. It sounds like.
Yes. And so Laramie just sort of backs away and is like, oh, fuck, and just like leaves, right? But basically there's like a jealous thing because she was obviously not allowed to have like male friends or be friendly or, kind to other men without being hit, essentially.
No. Yeah.
So that's the story. And clearly there's motive for him to throw him under the bus, right? Throw Laramie under the bus.
Yeah.
So this is even though this is a quote unquote missing persons investigation, big sarcastic quotes because there is no investigation, the police never contacted Laramie. Even after the family is like, hi, he got in touch with us. Here's his Facebook. Here's his contact information. This guy is actually he's named by Nick in the report. So like, why? What's the fucking deal? They never, ever talked to him.
That's fucking crazy.
And Laramie actually passes away. I don't have from what, but he is now deceased.
Okay.
So it sucks because if there is any truth to anything with him, like they lost their chance.
I feel like there's not, because he came forward and was cooperative,
Right.
and it sounds...
At least the family took the statement, essentially, right?
Right.
Took his statement, but Jesus Christ. Like, no, it's just insane that they would not look into that. Like,
I mean, I think if the cops took 5 seconds to do their fucking jobs instead of just being giant pieces of shit, they would have cleared him. That's just my feeling, just from hearing what you have to say. I could be completely wrong, but, like, my money's on the fucking boyfriend. Like, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, and again, the fact that Laramie did come forward and was transparent also, like, kind of looks good for him.
Right.
Right? He said, like, hey, here's the last time I saw her. Here's what happened. Da, 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 da. So the family later somehow is able to get Pepita's clothes and some other belongings she had at Nick's house from him. And this is such a striking image to me, and like a heartbreaking image of the lack of investigation in the ID Disappeared episode about Pepita. Sorry.
Uh-huh.
They literally, the family has her clothes and belongings in Ziploc bags sitting there because they're like, well, we thought this would like preserve it as evidence. This is like the clothes she was wearing the weekend she disappeared.
And they're just like, not. What is wrong with the cops? Like, why are they being so actively unhelpful? Like, what do they think happened?
No, their policy is like, they kind of blatantly don't care. Like, they're not trying to hide that they don't care.
They're just like, we're not going to help you. We don't care what happened to her.
Yeah.
But it's like, that is your actual job, is to like look into this shit.
No,
and they just
but it's just,
that's insane.
I don't know why that just really stuck with me, that they're like, we're trying to preserve evidence, and they put it in these little baggies, and it's like so fucking heartbreaking. Like,
that's really sad.
Yeah, like, I mean, it's a good impulse, I guess, but it's just sad that they're the ones holding the evidence, you know? Anyway, May 2020, there was a purported sighting of Pepita. A girl calls the family and says that she saw her at a local park called City Park. This is like a heartbreaking story too. Her sister, who's also super close with Pepita, drives out there to the park and doesn't find her, but then realizes that there's a Google pin dropped on top of that says City Park, the pin on top of a local seedy motel, which is super weird and like a fluke in the Google Maps like vortex or something. So she goes to that hotel, the like hotel with City Park written on top of it, where she finds a bunch of suspicious guys on walkie-talkies that watch her drive up into the parking lot. There's also vans with tinted windows and a variety of out-of-state license plates lined up against the back of the lot.
Human trafficking?
Yeah, and so she gets like this super weirded out and drives away for her own safety. And that's like this purported sighting. And so theoretically, someone could have seen Pepita there. She
could have been taken in, because if somebody's selling her phone also, like, that kind of lends credibility to that.
Yeah, and I think so. One very viable, I think, theory is that she was sold by Nick or by someone else into sex trafficking or human trafficking. And just a quick note that Albuquerque actually has a huge problem with this, partially because it's so close to the border and it's a meeting point of some major highways.
And also because the cops don't give a fuck, so it's real easy to just get away with it. Like, God damn.
My next line was that 40% of trafficking victims, I think nationally, are Native American women, which is actually quite disproportionate to the population percentage.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if that's just New Mexico or population overall, but either way, it's very disproportionately high.
Yeah.
And again, it's also because the cops don't fucking care and they won't do anything, right?
Right.
So yeah, it's a huge problem.
Jesus.
And later on, her sister also gets a false report of a Pepita sighting, runs up to find, he actually finds the quote unquote Pepita and realizes it's just a woman who looks eerily like her.
Oh, that's so weird.
Yeah. And she says, like, she realizes it's not her. My husband just violently sneezed. She realizes it's not her, but then she kind of gets deflated because she realizes some of the other sightings she's been hearing about might have just been this lady.
Person who's around. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So as of 2021, the family's never backing down. Anita and her sister are never backing down. They paired up they have an official MMIW advocate who works with them. They hold rallies. They put out press releases. Eventually, they do get the attention of, I think, a different DA in New Mexico that does not have like control over their case, I think, but it's just like basically a political voice to advocate for her.
Oh, that's good, though. I mean, that's helpful, you know?
They're getting attention, yeah. They are eventually able to get some records like surveillance footage and phone records on their own. Again, not through police.
Not through the fucking worthless ass cops.
No.
Yeah.
No. To my knowledge, the police have literally done not a thing.
That's so
Not
fucked up.
one moment of work has been put into this.
It's so fucking wild.
Insanely fucked up. But of course, they're limited to what they can get because they're not the investigators.
Right.
Yeah. So, but she's still fucking missing, and she has a lot of very specific tattoos. So people, especially if you're in New Mexico, I don't know if we have any listeners there or with family there, or if you have any friends or family in New Mexico.
We have friends there. We have a friend there.
Yeah.
We
I
do.
mean, seriously, look at her pictures. She's very distinctive looking, very pretty, and she has very distinctive tattoos. So look at the description. She's very petite. She's like super small. Just look at all those descriptions so you can, know her when you see her. And of course, if trafficking is a thing, they often change appearances a lot, or like dye their hair, right? Yeah. Or like she might look a bit different.
The tattoos would be hard though.
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's obviously like, I don't want to get sued or anything, but the right. Boyfriend's a pretty strong fucking suspect, but there is it is quite possible he even sold her into trafficking as opposed to straight up killing her.
Right.
So, and there's no like evidence that we know of like blood or a crime scene, but then again, there was never any crime scene investigation.
Yeah. So nobody checked.
How could we know?
He has a long time to clean up, like
infinity time. Yeah. Because no one's ever looked. Yeah.
Yeah.
Her sister, I will say, also took some of her clothes that they had to a Navajo medicine man. I feel like, I hope that's not the wrong term. A Navajo kind of spiritual leader for a ceremony. And in this ceremony, it's complicated. I want to explain it, but he basically like did a fire and like looked at the clothes, and he told her sister that he thought she was still alive, but being held against her will.
Oh yeah.
And that he saw her in a dark room.
That's scary.
It is scary, and I do kind of put a lot of credence in what the Navajo elder has to say, you know?
Fuck yeah, dude.
So I think it is possible she is still around and we could still find her. So
let's hope, man. That's fucked up.
And the ID disappeared thing, which I'm glad they got, because Disappeared is one of my favorite shows, and it's like really...
that means it's getting attention.
Yeah, it goes out to a huge audience. That's like one of the biggest press items they got. And on the Disappeared channel, they also conclude by comparing Pepita's disappearance to the case of Gabby Petito.
Yeah.
And that was really poignant to hear Pepita's family talk about Gabby, because it was like, I mean, the
it's
erasure
and similar, like,
Yeah, an abusive boyfriend as well,
Yeah, absolutely.
But again, it's just so obvious when you look at the comparison. And of course, not that Gabby Petito isn't a horrifying fucking case, it is. But the discrepancy is just like, hi, it's white supremacy, it's anti-Indigenous violence, and the erasure of these stories is a form of violence.
Absolutely is, yeah.
Yeah. So, and like I said, I'm glad that they're at least getting some press and traction, and these badass women are never letting it go.
Yeah, so. we should put her missing poster in our stories and on the Instagram for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oy oy oy. Okay. That's fucked up.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I have also a fucked up story, as you can probably guess. This is a little bit more historical, and I'm just gonna say that I was really torn about covering this because it's very deeply political, and it involves the American Indian movement, like the AIM. And as a white person, it's really hard for me to take sides on this because it's a very sensitive topic. So I just want people to know that, like, I recognize that, but I think this is a really interesting story and something I'd never heard before. And I have been a supporter of Leonard Peltier for a long time, and this really kind of fucked with my head. So if anybody doesn't know who Leonard Peltier is, I'll talk about it a little bit more. But he was a member of the American Indian movement. He was involved in a shootout in 1975. He was absolutely there. How involved he was, what he did, if he was responsible for the murders of these federal agents is all hotly debated. He has been in prison since 1975 for these murders. He's 78 years old now, and people are still actively fighting for his release, claiming his innocence. I have long believed him to be innocent. I don't trust the feds, and I think that it's very likely that he was set up. However, having said that, I'm now going to talk about the murder of Mae Aquash, and it's all going to come together. Okay. So Mae Aquash was born Mae Pictou on March 27th, 1945 in Nova Scotia, Canada. She had 2 sisters and 1 brother. And at the time of her death, when she was only 30, both her father and her brother had already died. So obviously a bit of a rough background. Her family grew up in poverty. I think her dad like stepped out right away, but her stepfather was an extremely proud Indigenous man, and he taught Anime and her siblings about her people, the Mi'kmaq people. That's where the tribe she's from. So she grew up being very proud of being an Indigenous woman. And she did go to so she was on like a reservation in Canada, but she went to high school at like a regular, like off reservation school. And so she was taunted and picked on by kids because, people fucking suck. So she was super tough. She had a real thick skin. She had a big mouth, which I fucking love. So she did fine. She did okay. And after high school, she moved to Boston after her stepdad died and her mother basically abandoned the family. So apparently a lot of Indigenous people from Canada went to Boston in like the 60s. I don't know why. I think it was to help with like the Indigenous rights movement and the American Indian movement. So she got really into Indigenous rights there. She had 2 kids that she with a man that she fell in love with. I don't know if I've read that they did marry and I've read that they didn't marry. This is not where she got the last name Aquash. So I don't know if they married or not, but they were together from 1962 to 1969 and had 2 children, 2 daughters during that time. She then married Nogishik Aquash, an Ojibwa activist, in a native ceremony. There's some really cool photos of this ceremony. And she did keep his name after they separated. So this occurred in the very early 1970s. And around this time, she got deeper into activism, Indigenous people's Indigenous rights and, activism. And she started hanging out with the founders of this group, the American Indian Movement. This group was formed in 1968. So she became involved in teaching and research in bicultural education. It's actually called the Teaching and Research in Bicultural Education School Project, otherwise known as TRIBES, which was a program in Bay Harbor, Maine, which taught young American Indians about their history. So she was very active in keeping the cultures and the history alive. Now, the American Indian Movement, AIM, which is what I'm going to call it from now on, was founded by Dennis Banks and Russell Means, 2 men who became the face of this movement in the 70s. And they were like counterculture heroes. Russell Means even had his portrait painted by Andy Warhol. Dennis Banks was like very charismatic. Means was a bit more in your face, and that kind of worked, they kind of played off of each other. The 2 were very famous, with newspapers like the LA Times calling them, quote, the 2 most famous Indians since Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse. So they're having Andy Warhol do portraits. LA Times is comparing them to Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse. So big time people. Crazy enough, there's also a picture of Dennis Banks and Jim Jones at one point. So sign of the times.
What a time. What a scene. Yeah.
Exactly. One of the other founders who was a close friend of Dennis Banks is Leonard Peltier, who was also, as many of you may know, very active in this movement. I've kind of already talked about him. And how everybody is, a lot of people are fighting for his release because he was possibly innocent of murdering these feds. And I say possible, whereas I used to be like, hell yeah, because again, we'll talk about it. But the AIM staged sit-ins and protests all over the country. They really pissed the feds off by basically demanding land back 50 years before it became a cool thing on social media. For instance, on Thanksgiving Day in 1970, AIM activists in Boston held a major protest against the Mayflower 2 celebration at the harbor by boarding and seizing the ship.
I could not love that anymore.
I know, it's so great. And Anime was there for that, right alongside all of these famous men.
Awesome.
In 1972, Anime participated in the Trail of Broken Treaties, where activists occupied and basically took over the Bureau of Indian Affairs in Washington, D.C. This is where she met Aquash Nugishik, who she married. And then in 1973, the 2 of them traveled together to the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota to join AIM activists and Oglala Lakota in what developed as the 71-day occupation of Wounded Knee. So obviously they went there for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
So this, I'll talk a little bit more about it in a minute, but basically there's a lot of politics involved here, but that area of Pine Ridge, it's a reservation. It's fucking just not a great place. And there were some native Indigenous politicians who were put in place kind of by the white American government, and it became this big point of contention. So it turned into this big occupation. That's just in a super small nutshell, right?
Yeah.
So as I mentioned, Anna Mae had 2 daughters. She left them in the care of her sister back in Boston while she went out on these, sit-ins and missions, believing, she was making a better life for her family and her daughters and just her people. So as I mentioned, she was a spicy lady. And while she was at one of these marches, she wrote her sister saying, quote, "These white people think this country belongs to them. The whole country changed with only a handful of raggedy-ass pilgrims that came over here in the 1500s. And it can take a handful of raggedy-ass Indians to do the same. And I intend to be one of those raggedy-ass Indians."
Dang, she's cool. I want to hang out with her.
She's a fucking badass.
Yeah.
Likewise, on her first night in South Dakota at Pine Ridge, when she met Dennis Banks for the first time, he told her that newcomers were needed on kitchen duty. She replied, "Mr. Banks, I didn't come here to wash dishes. I came here to fight." So
that's badass. Yeah.
Very spicy, very dedicated to her work.
A woman after Cindy's own heart.
Yes, I love her. Now, so she spent a lot of time at a place called Pine Ridge, like I said. And this is located, like I said, in South Dakota, with a tiny piece of it being in Nebraska. This is a very poor area. And at the time, it actually had the highest murder rate per capita of anywhere in the US. Between March 1st, 1973 and March 1st, 1976, their murder rate was 170 per 100,000, which is fucking insane.
Very high. Yeah.
Really, really bad. But a lot of AIM activists spent time there because they were trying to help the situation. So that was almost like ground zero for a lot of it, right? So this made it a target for feds because they wanted to tamp down the uprising and maintain their white supremacy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like I said, the feds, they're watching this place. They're just constantly up the asses of the people, right? So on June 26, 1975, a shootout ensued after 2 feds made up some bullshit about following a kid, like an Indigenous guy who stole something. And it's like, why are the feds involved in that? Like, why are federal agents following somebody for like a simple theft, right? Even if it's a burglary, like what the fuck? So this interaction ended with 2 dead feds and 1 dead Indigenous man, and with 2 men getting caught and charged with the murder, while Leonard Peltier, who was supposedly involved and supposedly shot one of the feds with an AR-15, went on the run.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, actually kind of in the year leading up to this, Anna Mae is spending a lot of time with Dennis Banks, who is also on the run for similar shit, because if the feds don't want you rising up, they're going to find a way to knock you down, right? So there's all sorts of gun charges. They get in shootouts with the feds, like Dennis Banks does, Leonard Peltier does, like all these people do. I should mention that the 2 men who were caught during this shootout on June 26th were both acquitted because it was found that they were shooting back in self-defense. These feds were shooting at them for no reason, and they were acquitted on self-defense.
Wow.
Like,
okay.
Yeah.
That's
So
unusual.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So Anna Mae had divorced her husband, and she started up an affair with Dennis Banks, which, like, he's the main guy and she's his woman, so she's in big time with the AIM. If you're that close to the founder, you're doing the dirty deeds with them, which
of course,
dirty, which I fully support. Anyway, except here's one thing: she's not actually his woman, or not his only woman, because he definitely had a common law wife, Darlene Kamuk Nichols. Right. So the 2 had been together since she was about 17 and he was 32, I believe, which is kind of fucking gnarly. And they were together for something like 12 years before breaking things off for good. Dennis had women on the side, but Darlene was always kind of his main flame. They had, I think, 4 children together. But Anna and Darlene were friends, Anna Mae and Darlene. But Anna Mae was deeply in love with Dennis. So they had this affair for about a year, and when he went on the run, both Anna Mae and Darlene went with him. So during this time, which was most of 1974 and 1975, Marlon Brando, who was a friend to the AIM movement, gave Dennis a mobile home and $10,000 to go on the run.
Okay.
So they all spent time together in this mobile home for about 3 months. At one point, at the end of this little 3-month-long thing, they were stopped again by the police, and another shootout ensued, with Leonard getting shot in the back but escaping into the woods. And at this point, he's a wanted fugitive for the murder of a federal agent.
Right.
Dennis, so basically Leonard, Darlene, and Anna Mae all got out of the mobile home,
Okay.
and then Dennis just boned out and, like, left them.
Yeah.
And then Leonard,
Bye.
he's like, deuces, because he's a wanted man. And then Leonard,
Yeah.
he's like, I'm out. He jumps into the fucking forest. He gets shot in the back, but he escapes and probably, finds somewhere to hide out. And then Anna Mae and Darlene get fucking arrested.
Oh my gosh, that sucks. Okay.
Yeah. So while in jail together, Darlene actually already knew about the affair, but she said they
Yeah.
never talked about it. They didn't talk about it in
Oh,
jail. And
It's
then
an
at
awkward
that,
time in that trailer, man.
right? She
Oof.
said at that point she didn't really care. She said basically it wasn't worth it for her to lose a friend over a man.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
kind of sweet. Yeah.
Yeah. So crazy thing here goes back to my hometown. Dennis moved to in 1975, moved to Davis, California, which is my hometown, with Darlene because Governor Jerry Brown granted him asylum in California and would not let the feds take him. As soon as George Duke Majian's dumbass came into power, within 1 hour of being sworn in, he had feds at their home in Davis, but they'd already
Oh my
left and were on the run
gosh.
to New York, right?
That's like, wow, the way that certain politicians prioritize like
Oh, I know. I'm like, really?
anti-Indigenous violence.
Right? It's
Okay.
like, that's what you're going to focus on. This guy's been living peacefully for 8 years in California, in
Right.
Davis. His wife, Darlene, was the chancellor of DQ University, which is like, it's like 10-minute drive outside of Davis. It's an Indigenous college. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So anyway, for this time, he's like living free, living the good life, running the AIM kind of from the outside. And within the organization, things are still going crazy. But anyway, after her first arrest, rumors started around Anna Mae. And her first arrest was prior to the mobile home incident, mostly due to her being released from prison so quickly. So there's a group of Sioux women who called themselves the Pie Patrol, which I sadly could not find context for. They were a group of women within the AIM who honestly kind of sounded like groupies. Like,
Okay.
Mary Crow Dog, who was the wife of civil rights activist Leonard Crow Dog, who was also present during the siege at Wounded Knee, referred to the Pie Patrol as, quote, loudmouth city women, media conscious and hugging the limelight, and said they loved the camera and took credit for what the women of the AIM were doing behind the scenes.
Okay, so not that helpful of a group.
No. So first of all, there's a lot of talk about how the men were like the shining stars of the AIM while the women did a lot of the work, which is...
This also happens with the Black Panther movement too. The ladies, the ladies' contribution gets erased.
Yeah, absolutely. So very common theme. These two groups are actually happening at the same time as well. So these women, this Pie Patrol, according to Darlene, did not like Anna Mae, and according to other women as well, and very likely could have started the rumors that she was a snitch. And this is a huge fucking problem because these rumors started to stick. And I think maybe the feds caught on, and it's not uncommon for the feds to try to turn people against each other as a tactic of bringing down organizations like the AIM. So they very well could have been releasing her from jail so quickly to make it look like she was an informant. And this also came on the heels of another trusted member being outed as working for the FBI and having infiltrated the ranks. So tensions and paranoia were super high in the early 70s, right? So people within the AIM were turning on each other left and right. There's a thing that they did called bad jacketing, meaning like, I think you're a jacket. I think you're working with the cops. And someone did this to Anna Mae, and that meant she was in big trouble, right? So Darlene said that beyond not talking about Dennis while in jail, what they did talk about was how terrified Anna Mae was to be released because she thought she was going to be killed for being a snitch, even though she wasn't one. About a month or so later in late 1975 November, Anna Mae was again arrested and again released on bail very quickly, spurring more rumors. At this point, she was still madly in love with Dennis and was desperate to see him. So she got out on bail. She had a court date the next day, but she skipped out on it, instead going to Colorado because she was told that he would be there. So she went there to wait for him at the home of a woman named Troy Lynn Yellowwood. She stayed there for over a week in late November and early December waiting for Dennis, but he never came. Instead, on December 3rd, 1975, 3 cars pulled up and took Anna Mae with them out of the apartment. She was never seen alive again. On February 26th, 1976, so about 2.5 months later, her body was found on the Pine Ridge Reservation, which is not close to Colorado. So
No.
at first, her cause of death could not be determined, even though she underwent an autopsy. The first ME was apparently a complete fucking idiot and didn't notice the giant bullet wound at the base of her skull. So he said that she died from exposure.
Okay.
She was then buried unidentified because they didn't even bother trying to identify her. Because again, the Pine Ridge Reservation, highest murder rate per capita. They don't know who these people are. They obviously don't give a shit. They're just burying the bodies in unmarked graves. However, Anna Mae's sister and other family members were looking for her, and they caught wind and asked that she be exhumed to be identified. And at that point, she was identified, as was her true cause of death. But as to who killed her, that would never be solved really ever, but it was partly solved. And the partial solving happened in 2004. So, in between this time, members of the AIM who knew anything refused to talk, and there were rumors swirling, which many people still believe, that the feds killed her and tried to make it look like the AIM did it. However, the feds at the time were still looking for the killers, as were the local police. And between 1976 and 1999, 4 grand juries looked at the case, but no arrests were ever made. In 1989, Darlene Nichols and Dennis Banks separated for good. She was tired of him being a womanizer. She was tired of being on the run. She wanted a normal fucking life, right?
Yeah.
Then in 2000, Darlene Nichols finally came forward with her story. Now, I will remind you, Darlene Nichols is married to the fucking founder of the AIM, whose side girlfriend was Anna Mae, okay?
Right.
She was sent in the year 1999. Her mother sent Darlene a clipping about Anna Mae's death and how it was still unsolved and how people were still looking into it, mostly because she's such a big member of the AIM. Anna Mae was a huge part of this movement, so her story was big news. So she started asking around because she knew something was going on. So she started trying to dig around and get to the truth. And this is what she says she found. Anna Mae was released on November 24th, went to Colorado, like I said. At various times before and after this, she had been beaten up, screamed at, held against her will, and questioned for being an informant by members of the AIM, including Leonard Peltier, who at one point supposedly held a gun to her head, to which she said, "If you think I'm an informant, just pull the trigger." So you can see why she was so scared. In fact, when they were in that mobile home, according to Darlene, they already thought that Anna Mae was a snitch, and she was essentially being held there against her will and was never allowed to go anywhere by herself. There was always someone with her so that she could not get away. Go to the grocery store.
So there's like tangible evidence that the snitch thing was a thing. Like they were like talking about that. That was out there.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's why I think Darlene wanted to know the truth, because she was already sort of party to some of this, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, she found out a bunch. I mean, tons of information. And she found out that a lot of people she knew saw Anna in her final days, including the last day she was seen alive, and that many of them knew what happened to her. And a lot of the people who knew were women, including the Pie Patrol women. But the men who took her were the ones who killed her. And those men were Arlo Looking Cloud, a man Darlene got to admit to murdering Anna Mae during a 3-hour wiretapped conversation because she was working with the feds.
Holy
and
shit.
he then turned on John Graham, who was also known as John Boy Patton, and also a woman who at the time of the murder was 50 years old and named Aunt Theta. Aunt Theta was so sick that by the time they got to her, they didn't even bother charging her. She died in 2011, the year after John Graham was given a life sentence. So Arlo Looking Cloud was given a life sentence in the year 2004, but it was reduced to 20 years after he testified against John. Troy Lynn Yellowwood, whose house Anna Mae was staying at, said that she had deep regrets when being interviewed by Darlene, because she said she stood by and watched Anna Mae be led to her death. She said she picked up the phone to call police, but another woman there who said she did not name hung the phone up and she didn't try again. So this is all stuff that Darlene is catching on tape. Taped
Holy
conversations
shit.
these people don't know they're having, right?
Wow.
Yeah. So Anna Mae had been raped as part of her interrogation, then shot in the head by John and dumped on Pine Ridge because they knew nobody would care because she was one of so many bodies. So now we kind of know who did it, but like why and on whose order? Because these two jokers were super low-level AIM members, and there is straight up no way they would have killed Dennis's former girlfriend without somebody on his level giving them the go-ahead, right?
Yeah.
So here's what Darlene thinks. And by the way, she only did this after she thought she was safe from Dennis. She moved multiple times to get away from him while working with the feds on this.
Yeah.
So they actually
it's
gave
like
her money.
dangerous for her as well.
Yes. So what she believes happened is that the Pie Patrol, full of jealousy, started this rumor and it stuck. And the reason it stuck is because of something Leonard Peltier supposedly told Darlene and Anna Mae in 1975. So while they're on the run in the mobile home, where they already think that Anna Mae is a snitch, Darlene testified in court that Leonard told them that he had in fact killed one of the feds, telling them that the man, quote, was begging for his life, or the motherfucker was begging for his life, but I shot him anyway.
Oof. Okay.
So Darlene was safe because she's Dennis Banks' wife, right? But Anna Mae is not, she's nobody, she's in the members, but like whatever. Now there's people saying she's a fucking snitch. She's not married to anybody. You know what I mean?
Right.
So these things start to kind of add up. Arlo himself actually went to authorities and confessed, saying as they made her kneel, she began to pray and then, quote, it was so fast. The problem with that is that she was shot in the head. This did not kill her. She may have been brain dead. She may have been mortally wounded, but the elements, like the freezing ground, the snow, was part of what killed her. So
that's why they went with the exposure thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So exposure was a factor. Other witnesses that Darlene spoke to said they heard murmurs from the Pie Patrol, namely a woman named Madonna Thunderhawk, who said that Anna Mae was a snitch and needed to be dealt with accordingly. And in fact, more than one witness has said that 3 women from the Pie Patrol interrogated and beat up Anna at Troy's apartment just hours before she was taken to her death. Now, Madonna Thunderhawk is a big fucking name in the Indigenous community and has the same PR reps as Angela Davis. So, she's a big time. And so I'm not saying any of this. I am saying this is what I read. So, when asked about her role in this, she said it was, quote, baloney. I never even tried to make sense of what happened to Anna Mae. They're never going to solve this. When they called me, I just told them I do not talk to the feds. Click. I hung up. You can't reason with a thug. They're not people. And I kind of love that, calling the feds.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm kind of down for that.
She
does admit that people thought that Anna Mae was a snitch, but she also said she wasn't worried about it and tried to talk to Anna Mae, and Anna Mae brushed her off. She then said this, which I do not like. There were hundreds of Anna Maes just throwing themselves at the men. And every time Dennis and these guys got a different woman, the girls would think they were first lady.
It was kind of minimizing Anna Mae's importance and
that sounds like a load of horse shit to me. Honestly, she sounds jealous and angry, and it also sounds like a way of deflecting and diminishing potentially her role. You know what I'm saying? Now, also, there's another murder that happened on Pine Ridge. A man named Ray Robinson, who went missing in 1973 after going to Pine Ridge to join the fight for the American Indian movement. Somehow he ended up on their bad side and got shot in the knee. He was taken to the infirmary where, wouldn't you know, Madonna Thunderhawk and Laura Lee Decora, her bestie, were the nurses who shoved him into a closet where he bled to death. In a taped interview that he didn't know he was having, Dennis Banks himself admitted this to Darlene while she was there visiting one of their children. They then got another witness to verify this story, but he said he couldn't tell who fired the shot, so it didn't sound intentional. However, stuffing this man into a fucking closet to die is very intentional and was done supposedly by these 2 ladies. So the feds got super stoked because they're like, we can use this as leverage against Madonna and Laura Lee to tell the truth about Anna Mae in exchange for immunity, because we can get them for killing this Ray Robinson guy. But if they flip on whoever gave the, you know, the order to kill Anna Mae, we'll give them immunity. We've got it. Whoever this Fed's boss is was like, no, you're just going to drop it. As soon as he got all this information, they were like, nope. So that's it. That's where it ends. 2 low-level dudes in prison, no accountability.
No, yeah.
You know, I mean, there's a ton of people on native TikTok talking about Leonard Peltier being responsible for Anna Mae Aquash's death. There's a lot of people who believe that Dennis Banks was responsible for it. Darlene obviously thinks that, you know, he was responsible for it. A lot of people who don't believe this, who believe that Leonard Peltier is innocent, he had nothing to do with it, point out that Darlene may have been having an affair at the time she was married to Dennis. She definitely married like he was an Indigenous man, but she married a cop that she knew. So during this time that she flipped, she married like one of the people who was looking into the case. They also bring up that she was paid for this, but she was given like $45,000 over 3 years, and that included like relocation fees. And she couldn't work while she was doing this. So to me, that's not really compelling.
She didn't gain a lot. Yeah.
She did not. So it's really crazy. I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, the testimonies of people are pretty compelling, the like wiretap testimonies, because it's really scary to do that, to like wire yourself up and get those statements. That's not something that you do easily, I don't think.
No, especially with Dennis Banks, especially if she believes that he's as dangerous as he is. For her to do that is fucking insane, because they weren't together anymore at that point.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to like heroize and romanticize the leaders, male, you know, leaders of these types of movements, when like, you know, a lot of them were pieces of shit to women still, you know, even though like politically they were doing really cool things that I support on like many levels, like behind closed doors, you know, when the cameras go away, like how do they act, you know?
Well, also, I'm not anti-revolution, and revolution includes violence. Like, they were building bombs and like putting them on the reservation to blow things up. They in fact made Anna Mae help to build them, so her fingerprints would be on some of them, because they're like, we think you're a snitch, so now you're with us. So it's not like these people were living this like, you know, super innocent
peaceful lifestyle.
They were fighting for their lives, and that shit is violent. So
yeah, but it's a different kind of violence than the one turned to your girlfriends and like sisters. You know, that I feel like that's coded as quite different.
Right. But killing her
community,
killing her because they thought she was a Fed is a real big fucking problem.
Yeah.
So I wanted to leave. I don't know how to feel about it, but I want to leave with a poem that Anna Mae wrote for Dennis, who I believe is a horrible man. He did die in 2017, and I don't care. She wrote this, and I don't think he deserved it. But is the sun up and you're going? My heart is filled with tears. Please don't go. I need you walking by my side. The road is long and weary, and I get so tired. Yeah. So Anna Mae, a passionate, beautiful, amazing woman who died at 30 years old. Pretty fucked.
Wow. She sounds really dope. And yeah. And I liked her quote about the raggedy pilgrims.
I know. It's so good.
Yeah. As the descendant of both raggedy pilgrims and Indigenous people, I like that.
Pretty fucking crazy. So I don't know how to feel. I don't want to piss anybody off, but
no, it's very, you did a good job. That's very like
thank you.
Presenting the evidence.
One of her killers is out, by the way. He got out, and now he claims that he was tricked and given heroin before he admitted to it. And it's like, well, you admitted it to the cops and you admitted it on tape. Like, were you on
twice?
Heroin? But did they just feed you a bunch of heroin? Like, and you kept, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. So, the debate rages on. So
rages on. Yeah, no, that's very contentious. And you know, it's possible that the feds could like victimize him in one circumstance and then he's the predator in other circumstances. Absolutely. You know, so it's like 100%. Quite complicated. Yeah.
There's a really good article about this from the New York Magazine. I'll link it in the show notes if people want to read about it. But honestly, like, you can go read the testimony of the trial for these two men, and like, it's pretty fucking crazy. Like, it's I got really sucked in. I had to truncate it obviously for this, but holy shit, dude. It's a lot of shit. It's a lot of shit. Wow. So Anyway,
when did they occupy Alcatraz? Is that these
oh,
guys?
they did that. Yeah, they did that as
Yeah.
well. I think that was in 1969. They did it for like 40 days or something.
Yeah, it's
I
awesome.
don't know if she was there then, but I know those guys were. Yeah,
They left up some of that like graffiti, so when you go in, you can still see it. It's like really cool. Yeah,
they occupied a ton of places that they're like, you all took this land from us. You're not even using it anymore. Fucking give it back. And the government was like, no, because we're pieces of shit. So
I mean, I like 4,000,000,000,000,000% support Native people occupying spaces and lands and buildings. Like, take them all.
Yeah, they were yours. Take them back. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, that's the story. There's our first two.
Oof.
I know.
It's a little depressing.
It's depressing, but I fucking love that story because it's so fucking interesting. And reading it gave me a lot of insight into the history of like those movements, which I wasn't super familiar with. So pretty fucking cool.
No, and I think the 60s movements in general, like I mentioned Black Panthers and like the 60s, those movements in general had issues with the women, like being still treated like shit within them. You know? They hadn't quite figured out like intersectional yet. They hadn't quite figured out like, you know, the multiple ways someone could be oppressed. Sometimes it was quite like
well, and then also like leaders of movements are leaders because not just because they're good at being
there's
leaders,
an ego factor
they
too.
Want to be. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So there is that.
For sure.
Yeah. Okay, so there is our first half. We'll be back in a couple days with part 2, so stay tuned. Thanks everybody for listening. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope maybe you guys learned something like I did. Pretty fucking cool. And until the next episode,
stay
off our list album. Bye.